I'm Charlotte Connelly and I'm a museum curator here at the Polar Museum, which is part of the Scott Polar Research Institute. And today I'm going to talk to you about 3 different objects that tell us something about the Arctic, the people who live there, and our understandings of the changing environment in the Arctic. Now this is really important because the Arctic is the place that is heating up the quickest. As the world is heating, it's heating up at a faster rate than other places on the planet. So understanding what's going on in the Arctic is really crucial to understand the bigger picture of climate change and environmental change. So the first object I want to talk to you about is this one. This is a parka, a waterproof jacket. It was made in East Greenland and it is made from walrus intestines. Now the reason I want to talk to you about this is because it relates to the sustainable harvest that people who live in East Greenland have relied on for thousands of years now. And crucial to that is the idea that it's very much part of the culture that you only take what you need to survive, and when you've harvested something, whether it's an animal or something else, you then use every part of it and make it all useful. So this is an example where a walrus has been harvested and the intestines have been used to make an item of clothing. Now the way you do that, you take the intestines, you clean them very carefully, then you blow them up a bit like a very long sausagey balloon and let them dry out. And then once you've done that, you can cut along one edge and fold it out so you get these strips of fabric that you can stitch together. And in this case, they're stitched together with sinew, which is also waterproof. And so you can make this very sophisticated item of clothing. Now, what has this got to do with climate change? I just mentioned that the Arctic is heating up faster than other parts of the planet. And really what point I want you to go away with by looking at this object is that the people who are often most affected by climate change are not the ones who have typically caused the biggest problems. So people living in the Arctic, very sustainable traditional ways of life. Many of them are still engaged in that kind of sustainable harvesting of their local nutrition sources, whatever that happens to be. They're not shipping in food unless they absolutely have to. They're not contributing to the same extent as people who live in the global north, places like us here in Cambridge, who are often contributing much more to global warming. So that's my first object. Now, my second object I have to pick up off the floor, so excuse me. So, this, hopefully you can see all of that in shot. This is a UAV. That stands for an unmanned aerial vehicle. And it's an object that has been used in Western Greenland, so the other side of Greenland, in research in recent years by one of our research projects. Now, what it does, you can see there's a gadget on the top here. And at the bottom, there's space for a camera to go as well. So what it does, you can program it to fly over a particular area of land, in this case, Western Greenland, and take photographs. And it's really good because those photographs are then geolocated, you know exactly where they've been taken, and you can stitch them together to make a really big image. And once you've done that once, you can repeat it and see how those images change. So this object has been used for taking photographs of the Greenland ice sheet, and then looking at how the ice sheet is changing, and in particular trying to map how the surface lakes on the surface of Greenland have been changing. And that's particularly useful for a number of reasons. One of those reasons is that if you can see what the lakes are doing, then you can understand a bit more about what's happening underneath the ice sheet. And if you know what's happening underneath the ice sheet, you can start to predict a bit more about its behaviour, because if there's a lot of water at the bottom of the ice sheet, it's really well lubricated, the chances are that that ice can move out to sea a bit quicker. So important for understanding all sorts of things, and of course very much tied into our environmental research in Greenland and understanding ice around the world, but particularly in the Arctic. So I'll pop that down. Now, we've been in Greenland. I'll just show you on a map which bits of the Arctic we've been talking about. So this is the UK down here, and then that first object, the parka, was made in East Greenland. The ice sheet that we were talking about that's been studied is over in West Greenland, and my next and final object comes from all the way up here in Alaska. But this is the Arctic Circle, so many of these issues affect places all around the Arctic Circle. So these, I said one object, it's really two, I snuck an extra one in. These objects are badges that were collected in Alaska in 2017. The first one, I'll just hold it up so you can see it, says, "Defend the sacred, defend the Arctic." And so this was a badge that was made really to raise awareness of the plight of the Arctic Refuge, which is a region in Alaska that in 2017 had been a reserve and was at threat of being opened up for oil prospecting under Donald Trump's government. And so this is part of a protest badge, and it was being given out at an event called the Alaska Federation of Natives, which is where many of the indigenous peoples of Alaska go along to meet up with each other, to exchange news, but also there's a kind of associated conference, and often politicians go along as well and share what they've been doing and listen to the communities as well. So Defend the Sacred, Protect the Arctic was all about that movement to try and make sure that the Arctic Refuge continued to be protected. Now, very sadly, that was unsuccessful, but since Trump has gone out of office, there have been steps to reinstate some of those protections, so it's not all bad. And then the other object I've got, it says, "I'm Inupiaq, I vote." And Inupiaq are one of the many indigenous peoples who live in the Arctic, in particular in Alaska. But again, it was handed out at that event, and it was to try and get indigenous peoples to actively play a part in the politics and what was going on in the region at the time, because typically they're underrepresented in the voter numbers. So again, we've got this story where the people who are sort of least responsible for global heating are at the same time not able to influence the outcomes for various reasons. So that's just an object that brings us right up to date with thinking about the impacts of global warming, global heating on people living in the Arctic, both today but also over the last many thousands of years. So I hope that was useful and interesting. We've got lots more stories here at the Polar Museum, so if you'd like to find out more, do stop by for a visit, and we hope we see you soon. Thank you very much.